Hello, welcome everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for joining. I'm Lindsay Ray Ackerman, a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I proudly support all of the clinical services across the Your Behavioral Health ecosystem of care, which includes Clear Behavioral Health, Neuro Wellness Spa, and New Life House. And tonight I'm joined by two of my esteemed colleagues, Dr. Shi of Neuro Wellness Spa and Sebastian Martin of New Life House, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves momentarily. But first, I just want to go over a few housekeeping rules. So, this webinar is intended for general education purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis of any kind, or treatment. If you have concerns about your teen's mental health, please consult with a licensed healthcare provider directly. Also, we welcome your questions. So please, as questions come up, put them in the chat and we are going to get to as many as possible as we go through this webinar. So we will be discussing privacy versus safety this evening, and we are going to get right in after we have Dr. Shi and Sebastian give us a little background about themselves and why they're so passionate about helping teens. So Dr. Shi, would you mind starting? Oh, hold on, Dr. Shi, we got to unmute you. Perfect.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, both as a child and adult psychiatrist. I'm also a father of a 21-year-old son and a almost 17-year-old daughter who are active screen users. I also actively use screens too. So hopefully this is not a shaming seminar. This is about education and sharing our own experiences and wisdoms about how we manage our own screen time and how we may manage them with kids that we either work with or that we have on our own. A little bit about myself. I have been a psychiatrist now for a long time. Gosh. Um, I did my training at UCLA in adult and child psychiatry, and I have been practicing now for 24 years. I joined Neuro Wellness Spa, which is part of the YBH group, a year and a half ago, and have been privileged to participate in activities like this, where I think our goal is really just to provide education and resources to the community. Because I think all of us who work in the field of mental health really do believe that community is important. Feeling like you're a part of the community is important, and how it contributes to our mental health. Um, was there anything else I should be specifically sharing?
Nope, not yet. You did wonderfully. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Dr. Shi. We appreciate that. Sebastian, would you mind introducing yourself, please?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sebastian. I am the executive director of the New Life Houses. I've been working here out of the South Bay of Los Angeles for over a decade, focusing primarily on substance use and mental health for young people. I'm on the Substance Youth Coalition for the Beach Cities Health District. I speak at almost all of the local middle schools and high schools annually about substance use prevention, about mental health, what mental health looks like in 2026. And so this is a passion of mine. I'm an alumni of New Life House. And so this, at one point, my parents could have really benefited from this conversation. So I'm thrilled to see some familiar names here in our Zoom webinar. And our intention here is to be as informative as possible. Dr. Shi, Lindsay Ray, and I, we have a passion for trying to prevent the fire rather than just simply putting the fire out. And even though I think we're very good at putting the fire out, we want to be preventative in scope. And so I'm really, really grateful when I see parents coming in here to get their questions answered. I think that's a really good first step. And just having this space be occupied by parents that are concerned, that want to gain information and insight into how to be the best parents. I think that's totally invaluable. And so, yeah, it's great to be here, and I hope to be as informative as possible.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Thank you both so much for sharing time and space with me this evening. And as you all mentioned, really looking forward to just providing some value and education. Being a parent is really tough. We support parents throughout our ecosystem of care, a lot of them daily, and we know how scary it can be. So you're not only going to hear from us as kind of the experts of the evening, but we're so excited to also welcome in some alumni and their parents later on in the webinar. So you're going to be able to actually hear directly from their lived experience, which I think is amazing and some of the most valuable information that you'll probably receive. So let's get right into it, and let's start with setting the stage a bit with some education, right? And so, Dr. Shi, I'm going to ask you specifically to help break down for the parents that are with us this evening and the caregivers of teens. What is really the difference that we're talking about here about privacy and secrecy or safety, right? How do we know the difference, right? If our teen is struggling and obviously they're in developmental phase where building autonomy and independence is what they're supposed to be doing, right? And pushing boundaries a little bit. But how can we help parents understand, hey, this is kind of where privacy exists at an age appropriate level. And this is where safety concerns, and you have to start maybe stepping in where there's some concerning around actual like secrecy and safety.
Yeah, good question. So, for the parents out there, you were probably informed, probably by your pediatrician. So, I'm going to start with young kids that a basic part of privacy is that children should not be exposing their private areas, right? And a simple way is where you wear underwear. Like if it, like those are the areas that should be only exposed in the privacy of the home, amongst family members, and that should not be exposed, nor should anybody be touching those areas unless it's a family member for a specific reason, or a medical professional in the presence of a parent. So that's kind of a simple, basic concept of privacy that all children yeah, should be taught and learn. And unfortunately, some kids are not taught that, right? And that's a setup for abuse or being taken advantage of, when they enter school or other settings where there's that potential. Um, when you get into the tween years, when kids enter puberty, that's when, of course, their hormones are starting, and that conversation about their body and about privacy should be even more important or emphasized, especially with daughters or females, obviously. Unfortunately, that is a larger risk factor. Girls in general, their rates of depression and anxiety double to triple during adolescence compared to boys. And as a combination of factors, hormones, obviously, and then obviously just the social pressures of being a girl. Let's be honest, it is much harder being a teenage girl than a teenage boy. Anybody who says it's not is not living in reality, right? And hopefully we don't have to have an in-depth conversation about that, but that's a basic fact, and that's why the rates of depression and anxiety are double to triple of boys starting in the teen years. As far as secrecy, good question, and this could be even a philosophical debate. But secrecy, I think, as a teenager, I mean, when I think of the word like secrecy as a teenager, I don't think it has good connotations or positive connotations associated, because it means that they are perhaps intentionally trying to keep information away from their parents. And that's different than privacy. So here, I'm going to give a very general example, and I'm going from being a father. When my son was in junior high, he started swearing, which is normal, right? But he didn't have any social judgment about it. So he would start swearing in front of my wife, his mother, and me. And I would stop him. I'm like, his name is Josh. I'm not going to totally expose him, but plus he's 21 now. And I would say, Josh, I said, do not swear in front of your mother and me. And he's like, well, why not? Kids are doing it at school. And I'm like, listen, I'm like, first of all, you're not supposed to. I'm like, are you allowed to swear in the classroom? He's like, well, no. And I'm like, and I asked him why, and he didn't really know why. And I said, because you're not supposed to swear in general, especially in front of adults, right? And then I told him, I go, listen, I know you're a teenage boy. I'm like, if you're swearing on the playground away from adults with your friends and you're not hurting anybody's feelings, whatever. I go, but you have to I was trying to teach me, you have to understand rules. Like you should not be swearing in the classroom. You should not be swearing in front of the adult monitor on the playground. You should not be swearing, at home. But, we understand that. So where was I going with this? Secrecy is more about when kids are again withholding information. And then you got to ask, I think, why? you know. And if it's okay, I'm gonna pull this in. If they're like, oh, well, I don't want you to know the swear words I'm learning, okay, that's not a large concern. But if they are, if someone's offering them drugs at school, if they're using social media or gaming online and they're a tween and adults are asking them to contact them or asking them to see them on camera or asking them to sell pictures of themselves and they're not sharing that information that and they're keeping that as a secret, that's a problem, right? And ultimately it comes down to, I think, building trust with your kids, and you're not going to know everything about your kids. I think that's another thing is that I don't believe in what I would call like helicopter parenting or rigid parenting where you're demanding things from your kids. You want to give them some space, but you want to build trust with them. You want to be able to tell them and encourage them to come to either us as parents or a responsible adult like a teacher or a school counselor or just a responsible adult in their lives where they can share things with. And sometimes kids will share obviously things with their teacher that they won't share with us as parents. And you know what, as a father, that hurt my feelings when I heard that. I'm like, I'm a child psychiatrist. How could you not share this with me? But we're all human. Then I had to remind myself when I was a kid, I'm like, yeah, I didn't share everything with my parents. That was like that was absolutely like unthinkable to share everything with your parents growing up, especially as a teenager. And so that's the important thing about, I think, forming relationships with your kids, encouraging them to form relationships with other adult figures like teachers, counselors, members of the community. If you go to church, any organization where the adults and you trust them. Now you can't control everything, but it's important to again form relationships in a community at school, meet the teachers, meet other adults, so that you know who your kids are socializing with. So
I
that's a starting point. I'll try to hand that off to somebody else or to some perhaps.
Amazing. Yeah, no, Dr. Shi, I think that's really important to the call out around your kids aren't going to tell you everything. And it's not about having your children tell you everything, but it is about, making sure that there's trusted adults in their life that they can talk to. And I think that's really crucial. I also think you brought up some really great information just about, digital safety and technology use and things of that nature. And I think that's so important. I'd love to kick it over to Sebastian to talk a little bit about, just that theme in general and maybe how to set boundaries, how to appropriately monitor, access, sharing location, passcodes, things of that nature, really coming from, again, supporting the developmental phase of independence and autonomy, but also making sure we're keeping our young people safe. So, Sebastian, would love to hear from you.
Well, it's a multifaceted question, and I have a multifaceted response, I guess. Listen, I think the social media landscape and technology obviously has changed tremendously over the last 3, 5, 10 years. It's a totally different world, right? And I think young people now have it a lot harder. Take into consideration, right? And I've said this before, and I'll continue to talk about it. Like when I was growing up, I compared myself to the other members of my school, the kids that grew up in the same neighborhood as me, right? If my buddy up the street, Austin, has a cool bike or a cool skateboard, if I can have a cool bike or skateboard like that, then I'm going to be okay, right? And now young people are comparing themselves to the millions of other people that they're seeing online. And to Dr. Shee's point, there's such an influx of anxiety, feeling less than, low self-esteem that's been brought on by this comparison thing that young people do, that everyone does, right? We want to look the part. We want to look the part, and we do not want to feel in any way ostracized, especially as a young person, right? They want to fit in and be accepted by their peers. And just as like I think now being seen and supported by a peer group is almost one of the most important things for young people. Sometimes it's more important than their grades. It's more important than their extracurricular activities. They want to fit in and they do not want to feel ostracized. And so social media plays a huge factor in that. What am I putting out for the world to see? And many parents that I'm familiar with, they know all the tricks of the trade, right? There is amazing technology to try and combat some of these things and help parents to set boundaries that do exist. I want to preface and tell you that our loved ones, our young people that are in our communities, they know about this technology and they know how to get around this technology too, right? So I have what I would say is like a conservative approach to parenting. Maybe conservative is not the right word, but a very direct approach that, like, especially in my focus, which is substance use prevention, right? So many of the substances that young people are struggling with that they have access to has been really brought on by access through social media and online platforms to acquire those substances. And obviously, you get a young person who's struggling with self-esteem, anxiety, depression, feeling less than. Then on this social media or technology, they're getting access to substances, which they are thinking is going to help this problem that they're dealing with. And we all know that it amplifies that problem, right? So parents, I'm really outspoken to parents of like, hey, in the scope of being preventative, be very, very direct and know what's going on, right? And I know tons of parents, right, where they're like, well, I see who's, communicating with them through social media. I've seen what their social media looks like. I can't tell you the amount of parents that I've talked to that didn't know about the second Instagram account that their young people have, right? The other Snapchat account that they have, right? No, but we have Life 360 and we're tracking his location and we can see some of these things. Most young people know how to get around that if you turn on airplane mode, that it stalls the application out and you can get and go and do anything, especially South Bay specific. Think about accessibility in the South Bay. Most kids, if they're not driving, they have an e-bike or they have a bike and they can get to wherever it is that they want to go and have little to no accountability if they're able to turn off those applications and combat the efforts of technology that are really meant to help parents feel secure. But in the same respect, it's very similar to Ring cameras. And I don't know if this is anyone's experience. The Ring cameras were created as a way for us to feel like protected and safe in our own homes. But now anytime I get a notification from Ring, who's at my door, right? And we've gotten, technology has advanced so much that it almost has an inverse effect, right? And it really keeps parents hyper vigilant, and there's an anxiety thing because you want to be ahead of the curve. And so when it comes to parenting, I think it starts with an open and honest conversation about what your expectations are as a parent. And I wish there was like a shortcut to that, right? Where you could just install an application and that be the end of it and you can see everything. But the conversation has to happen. And that's South Bay specific. I think those tough and uncomfortable conversations to facilitate on behalf of a parent is where it is that we run into the most trouble, right? Because there's not open dialogue, because there's not ground rules, because there's not clear cut expectations, right? And conversations about things like, hey, here's what to do if you find yourself in this kind of situation. Or have you ever been in a situation where someone's asked you to do something virtually that made you feel a little uncomfortable? And so if I can give you any piece of advice, yeah, I can give tons of suggestions over different apps to consider, different tracking methods to consider, right? But if you hear anything from this conversation tonight, the most important thing that I can encourage is parents having the strength and the willingness to have that tough conversation, to sit down, to lay some ground rules down, and really have that tough conversation where it is that some middle ground can be met. Young people want agency now more than ever, right? And that conversation is probably going to feel like nails on a chalkboard to them at time, and maybe even to some of the parents in here, right? To think about it, put yourself in their shoes, to sit down with your parents where it is that they're like asking you some of those tough questions. It's not necessarily what you want to be doing on a Thursday night, case in point, right? So it's really, really important to start with the conversations, things to consider are that seem to be foolproof to me. And I'd be happy to provide my contact information, but there is technology. There's Bark phones and monitoring. They are the software and the hardware. You can see every text message, every social media interaction. There is technology that exists. But again, more than anything, the conversation has to happen and expectations need to be set down, and holding our loved ones accountable to those expectations that we've made abundantly clear. That's the follow up that's really needed.
Can I
Yeah,
do that, Lindsay?
absolutely, Dr. Steve,
So,
please.
Sebastian, I completely agree. One other thing that you were talking that I thought about, certainly when my wife and I were raising our own kids, is the importance of parental communication with one another. And then these days, up to 50% of the kids that we see are also from split families, which makes communication even, or divorced or separated parents, which makes communication even more difficult. But that's a place I almost always start when I'm working with families in discussing how important it is that the parents come to agreement. If you're a parent, you're never going to agree on everything with your spouse or your partner. However, you have to at least come to some basic agreements about things like what kind of limits are we going to put on screens, how much privacy are we going to give our kids, who are we going to let them go out with, what is their curfew. And again, there's no universal rules, but it has to at least start with some agreement, some basic agreement and communication, because I can't tell you how many times where I'll hear from the kid, oh, well, kids, remember, we were all kids too. So they'll figure out who they can take advantage of. Oh, I know that my mom's really strict, but when I go over to my dad's place, like he doesn't care. Half the time he's not even there, right? And that that doesn't set a good precedent, right, for how we supervise our kids, because that is part of parenting, is supervision, communication, obviously, as Smash pointed out, but then also supervision and then co-parenting, right? That's like I think what I'm trying to emphasize is the importance of co-parenting.
Yeah, wonderful call outs, both of you. Um, I really, truly, firmly believe in having those tough conversations. And when I work with families and parents, I'm consistently helping parents recognize that it's really more about opening up the opportunities, right, for the conversations, and not necessarily expecting that every time you open that door, you're going to get something or what you want, right? So it's managing your own expectations. Also, simultaneously, really learning how to hold your own anxiety and fear and worry, right? As parents, it's such a natural part of your life to be worried about your kids, right? And fearful of something bad happening, right? But what do you do with that fear, that worry, and anxiety? Are you constantly just kind of projecting it over out into your children, or are you actually processing, holding it, recognizing, hey, I'm a well-resourced adult. I can manage my anxiety and fear while simultaneously opening the door for opportunities of having the tough conversations. And Dr. Shi, I can't agree with you more about being a united front with your co-parent, whoever that may be, whether you're still partnered or separated or divorced, living in the same house, not living in the same house. It is so imperative because, like so eloquently spoke about, right? Kids will go where they need to get what they want, because that's part of what they're naturally going to be exercising, right? The pushing in boundaries, the seeing where they can get away with what. So as the adults, right, and as the parents, it's really our jobs, right, to create that safety and the containment. And part of that is really getting on the same page with that co-parent, and having common ground so that you're holding that united front. So, Sebastian, you brought up something really important, and you brought up the really true fact and reality of our teens today. And that's the fact that they deal with a lot of peer pressure, a ton, right? And I would love to hear both of your thoughts around how can we as parents, right? We as the adults, right, who are caregiving for these teens, how can we show up and support them in navigating and dealing with that extraordinary peer pressure that they have?
All right.
Dr. Shi, you want to go or?
Yeah, I'm gonna give it to you first, Sebastian.
Awesome. Yeah.
Listen, this is a tough question to answer because every situation is so different, right? And I think we're here in the South Bay, right? This is where our support center is. This is where a lot of the work that I've been doing. This is a very tough environment. The kiddos are tough in the South Bay, and the pressure to succeed is almost just as tough too, because this is a very high achieving area, right? Our young people are going to amazing schools right out of high school. And so there is a lot of pressure that they're facing, not just socially, academically, from extracurricular activities. I think the best thing that I could suggest to be as broad as possible is there is a certain amount of modeling that really needs to be done, right? And helping our young people to see it through the actions and the way that we carry. They are like sponges. They pick up on everything, right? And so again, I'm certainly not saying anyone on this call, right? But like there is a judgment oftentimes that parents will have of others, of other families, of other circumstances, of other situations. And our young people, oftentimes they pick up on that and they absorb that, and then they will cast similar, and they maybe will be the one enacting some of that peer pressure or receiving it from multiple ends. And so I think again, it comes down to the modeling of kinds of conversations that we're having and like making expectations be clear and letting parents really show the way in which they like their loved one to live, right? And being supportive of people lifting each other up and making sure that they know that they have a place to go to and a home that is safe for them to talk about the pressures and the experiences that they're encountering, right? But peer pressure is very, very prevalent, especially in my working substance use prevention, that kind of thing. The ease of access of things like nicotine here in the South Bay and really all over California, the ease of access of cannabis, right? The ease of access of alcohol and the way that alcohol is being marketed to young people these days. South Bay specific, it's the norm. It's the norm here for kids to experiment and that kind of stuff. And so there is a lot of peer pressure. But I think, one, parents need to model the kinds of conversations and the vulnerability and the transparency that they would like to see out of their young person and create a space where it is that they can talk about their experiences within their respective homes. Two, I think if parents can show a way in which they encounter and help build up their community around them, from friends to colleagues at work to other parents that are participating in the same extracurricular activities, I think that's going to create a platform to where it is that young people are going to see what it is that their parents are doing and attempt to model that without knowing they're doing it really. That's a very broad answer. And again, there is not a cookie cutter way to navigate this conversation because each family dynamic, it's not a cookie cutter experience. It's very, very different. And so I think modeling is really what I would lean into. And I don't have kids of my own, right? So my answer could be very different when it is that I have children of my own. But I've been working with families and young people for such a long time, and so much comes back to that modeling. I think young people really need to see and experience it from their own parents and see how it is that they navigate pressure and the pathways and open lines of communication that can come as a result of just like vulnerability. That would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I completely agree with what Sebastian is saying. That was my first thought too, Sebastian, when that question came up, was how important we are as role models, as parents. I mean, every child that's brought into this world and grows up will attach or should be attaching to adult figures, and the first adult figures that a child attaches to are their role models. Now, none of us are perfect, that I think that's an important thing. I'll share something I think is funny. People think it's funny is when my kids were growing up and I had a long day at work, I'd come home and of course I'm a human being, I'd lose my temper or say something I shouldn't say to my kids, and then my wife would look at me and in front of the kids she would say, "I can't believe you're a child psychiatrist." Right. And I would tell, "Hey, I'm not being a child psychiatrist now. I'm being a pissed off dad right now is what I'm being." So the important thing I'm trying to emphasize here is in terms of modeling, when you're spending time, spend time with your kids, right? Spend quality time with them. Don't just sit on your phone and let them sit on your phone and have no conversation going on. There should be times where you're interacting with your kids, especially when they're young. You should be taking them to the playground, right? Taking them to sports or having conversations with them as much as they want to talk to you. My teenager did want to talk to me a lot, was annoyed by me. But you want to be interacting with your kids. You want to be role modeling for them in terms of communicating, listening, obviously resolving conflict with them, with their mother, with other adults, socializing as Sebastian pointed out. And then the other thing I wanted to emphasize is the importance of encouraging your kids to socialize outside of screens, which was a challenge for me too. I remember on Friday, I'm Gen X, so I grew up on Friday night. You go to the high school football game and then you go to Denny's afterwards. Where when my son was in high school, I'd be having dinner and then what are you doing tonight? It's Friday night. I don't know. I'm like, why don't you go to the football game? Well, I already did that. I didn't really like it. I'm like, well, why don't you call some of your friends and invite them over? You know, nah, well, I'm gonna meet some of my friends and we're gonna game at 9 o'clock, right, on the PlayStation or whatever. And I would get mad. I'm like, what's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you spending time? Like, why aren't you trying to get out of the house? Like, but kids are different now, obviously. But what going back to the point I was trying to emphasize, I think it's important not only to encourage your kids to socialize, but then meet who your kids are socializing with. God forbid, right? If you can, it's not always possible. Meet the parents of who your kids are socializing with. Get to know the kids and the parents so that you develop a sense of trust. Because, we were all kids once. You'll get a sense pretty quickly if you're paying attention if you like a kid and their parents or not. And encourage socialization, not just through screens, but also in person. Get together with other family, they call them play dates these days, right? I didn't have play dates when I grew up, but I thought that was completely weird when I heard about it, but that's the norm now. So schedule play dates
Yep.
uh, and socialize with the kids and parents of who they're around. And that encourages them to socialize in person and also helps you know who your kids are socializing with. Because we all have stories and we all know, and we all grew up with kids that we knew that we liked, and we also knew kids that were kind of dangerous and cool, right? And kids that were boring, and that's no different today as it was yesterday. But you want to get a sense of who your kids are getting drawn to, right?
Yeah, I agree, Dr. Sheehan. I think that's really important to point out, right? You insert yourself, right, as much as possible while, respecting appropriate boundaries and things of that nature. And I think that is always an interesting dynamic that parents struggle with as their kind of child grows up and becomes a teenager and things of that nature. So I think that's really important. I want to shift over quickly to the chat because we're getting some questions, which is wonderful. So please feel free to throw your questions in our chat. So Sylvia writes, our son has autism and ADHD. He masks at school and sometimes keeps some details from us. He usually tells us days later, but it's concerning because he wants to belong and fit in. How can we let him know he is enough? So I'd love to take this one if you all don't mind. Because Sylvia, my heart goes out to you. I can feel just the care and the love, even through, the chat and your question and your words. And this is a tough one, right? Because aside from his, diagnostic presentation and what he's going to have to navigate, this is something that most teens will go through, right? The struggle to just fit in and want to belong, right? To the cool kids or a group in general. And how can you let him know he's enough? By reminding him at home. And that is all you can do because you can't control the kids at school and you can't control whether or not, they bring him into the fold or don't. But what you can do is hype him up at home and remind him that he is enough. and encourage him to, reach out and say hi to someone, or sit by somebody, or, ask somebody to, hang out. So you can do those little things, but just remember, there's only so much that you can control. So don't beat yourself up about it. All right, I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. However, we do have questions that were submitted prior. So until I see some more questions in the chat, I'm going to go over to the questions that we do have submitted. So I think this one is a really, really good one, because specifically I just talked about it. So how do you deal with things that you can't control? So who else shows up when your teen is hanging out, when you've maybe approved specific people or specific, kids, but then older kids show up, or, other people show up. How do parents navigate that?
Sebastian, you want to take this one first?
Yeah, I just have suggestions surrounding this kind of thing. Listen, I think again, because young people, like I said earlier, they don't want to feel ostracized. They want to feel accepted by whatever that crowd is, right? And if appropriate conversations are happening at home, I always encourage parents to provide their kids with an alibi, right? Young people will pick up on the fact that something's going on, and there's some people that might be here that maybe they're going to start doing some stuff that I'm not too comfortable with, but they don't have an avenue where it is that they can comfortably walk away from that situation without feeling like they may be ostracized or even made fun of. This goes back to the peer pressure conversation, right? If there is appropriate conversations that are happening in a proactive way, not a reactive way, we can help set our kids up for success by giving them an alibi, right? So when I'm talking at local middle schools and high schools, I've often told parents in the parent portion of it is like, give your young person an alibi that if they are in a situation that is uncomfortable for them, to text you a code word, whatever that code word might be, right? Let's just say, uh, banana. Okay. I know that's just top of mind,
I
right?
want to go
But
home.
yeah, whatever it might be, right? And parents should know intuitively that, hey, I'm going to wait 90 seconds because I've gotten this code word, right? And I'm going to give them an out, right? I'm going to call them and tell them, hey, some stuff's going on at home. I need you to come home right now, right? And they can put the blame and onus on parents. That's under the expectation that parents aren't going to care that that's happening, right? But they can place it on the parents of like, hey guys, I am so sorry. Like my mom just contacted me and said that I have to come home right now. We can catch up again later next time, but like she's coming to pick me up, right? I'm going to go meet her down the street so you guys can keep doing what it is that you're doing, right? It gives young people an avenue to really navigate around like this perceived peer pressure. And oftentimes we know from DARE programs and things like that, our peers usually aren't forcing that kind of like, whether it be substance use or unhealthy behaviors, that you don't usually get to a place where it is that they're forcing them, but that's not going to prevent what it is that's going on between our young people's ears. And if they have a way where they can socially bow out of a situation, place the onus and the agency on mom and dad, hey, they're out, I got to come home. Yeah, my brother's is up to something. They're asking for me to go back there. Sorry, guys. Such a bummer. Um, we'll hang out again sometime soon. It creates an avenue where it is that they can gently bow out of that situation. So that's just a recommendation. We're not going to always be able to control, right, who it is that they're interacting with when they go to the football game, right? There's going to be older kids there. There's going to be kids from the other school there, right? There's going to be all these different avenues that no one could have seen coming. But if the appropriate conversations are happening and we're giving them like a safety net to where it is that they can lean on, I think that it will give them the agency that young people want, right? They want to be able to have that platform where they can go and engage and hang out, but they sometimes need that out, that safe out to avoid a sticky situation. And again, like you trust your young people, but verify. Trust but verify always, right? They're saying they're going somewhere. To Dr. Shee's point earlier, one of the classic maneuvers that I would pull is, oh, I'm going to go hang out with my buddy who lives up the street, right? Was I actually with my buddy who lives up the street? No, I wasn't. And that situation could have been avoided had my parents been communicating and just confirming with my buddy up the street's parents, like, hey, just confirming that Sebastian's coming over there tonight, right? I wasn't over there often. So trust what they're saying, but verify.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Those are great tips, Sebastian. So we've got a couple other questions in the chat that are coming in. So I don't, we've got one that's specific from Jen. So essentially, I'll make it kind of two in one, right? What age should we start letting teens go out with their friends without us? And how do we help our teen understand that she doesn't need makeup at 14? I'm thinking maybe I should take that one. So for the first part, at what age, right, should your teen be going out without you? That's a family decision, right? It's a personal decision. And that's what makes parenting hard, right? Because you're the responsible party, right? It's up to you. And you have to make those decisions. You have to make the decision for what's right for your household, your family dynamic, and your teenager, right? And that's hard, right? Now you can get advice from peers and peer support groups and things, but ultimately it's your decision. And in regards to makeup, that's also really personal, right? Because I mean, we, like Sebastian and Dr. Shi have mentioned, right? This is a different kind of digital world than when we grew up, right? And 14-year-olds are watching, YouTube stars, right? Doing makeup every day. And it's really like an art and it's so much fun and there's creativity behind it. So maybe that's the answer, right? Maybe you allow her to play with makeup at home, right? But she can't go out with it because maybe it's a form of creative expression, or maybe she starts with just shimmery lip gloss, right? And then that's it. So again, it's a personal decision, and I hope that helped. We do have another question. We've got a lot of questions coming in. So Dr. Shi, I'm going to ask you to answer this one. This one comes in from Laura, and she says, "My son is a freshman in high school, and he is on social media, and I want to know if it is appropriate to ask my son to ask him to add me as a friend, or should I tell him I want to be able to see his phone whenever I want?" That's a loaded one. Dr. Shi, what do you say?
Great question. I mean, when I'll start with myself, when my sons had social media, I think you should ask first, right? I mean, hopefully it's as simple as, hey, can I follow you on Instagram or whatever. Back in the day it was Facebook, right? Um, and then if they say yes, then problem solved or challenge solved. But if they say no, then make it a conversation. Oh, well, why not? Why are you uncomfortable? And now we're getting back to the circling back to the privacy issue. And I think you certainly don't want to force your kids. Now, if you have concerns, if your kids are having behavioral problems, if your daughter has a boyfriend that you're concerned about, then there should be more serious conversations about, is there secrecy going on? Are there things being hidden? I Let's see. The second question, should I know I want to be able to see? So good question. So do either of you want to add anything about being added as a follower, as a friend on social media besides what I said?
No,
Or
I think you're good. That was great.
yeah,
Great answer.
there's no great and oh, here's the other thing I discovered later on, of course, was that as Sebastian, my son had a second IG account. And of course, when I found out, my feelings were hurt. I'm like, you have a second IG account and you didn't invite me? And then he got all apologetic and I felt bad. I know I felt because he said, well, it's just for my friends. He had like 12 people on his second account and he had, whatever,
Yeah.
200 account, his main account. So again,
So
this is that.
interesting
But
to
again,
navigate
communication.
that dynamic.
Yeah, communication is important. I take the same thing again. There's no absolute, but I of course, Sebastian and I and Lizzie probably also we see very difficult cases. So if as a parent you're concerned, if there's already behavioral problems going on, if there's concerns about substance abuse, if they're breaking curfew, if there's significant academic decline, behavioral issues at school, and of course the phone is going to be a source of information. I personally tell parents, and explain this to my own kids, your phone is a privilege. It's not a right, number one. And when kids challenge me, when I talk to them, they go, "No, it's my phone." I'm like, "Who's paying for your phone?" Your parents are paying for your phone, okay? You do not own your phone. Like I think this is a conversation that parents need to have with their kids in the beginning. Like this phone is a privilege to you, just like when if you get a car, or if you get the first time you get to go out with friends alone,
Yep.
or the curfew gets extended. These are privileges that we as parents are giving our kids. These are not rights. There's a reason kids don't have, they're called kids. They don't have rights as an adult until they're 18, right? There's laws around this that have been
Yeah.
thought of. And therefore, if there's concerns, parents should very directly explain to the kids, no, your phone is not your property. It is a privilege that we, as your mom and dad, have given you. We have concerns about what's going on. We're going to politely ask you to hand over your phone.
I
Now,
think that's great, Dr. Shi. I really think that's so important, right? To when I work with parents, a lot of times I kind of remind them and like empower them. I'm like, hey, you pay for this, right? So just remember that. So thank you for that. We have another question. We have a couple more, so I'm going to get through these. Sebastian, I'm going to give this from one to you. Jolie asks, I have a 16-year-old who shares about his struggles with us, as well as having a brother who has mental health and substance use issues, to fellow youth group members and adult leaders as part of his testimony. Concerned about feedback he might receive from peers or adults, truly wanting to help, but may or may not be trained, and then therefore may trigger, into conversations that might ultimately not be safe. So, Seb, I'd love you to take this one.
It goes back to the control side of things. First and foremost, if your son is communicating and being transparent with, I mean, what seems like members of church group, something like that, and is being open and honest, and from what it sounds like in the question, seeking support, I think that's really, really important, and that should be acknowledged, right? That this young person is asking questions, and if there is good open rapport, right? Like again, we just as easily could hear something from a peer, from someone at a church group, something like that, that triggers or activates us. Just as easily could be found with a quick search on well, blurt it out there, but on a cell phone, right? So there is so much more information that is available, and there's so many more things that could trigger a young person today. But I think the important part is oftentimes, hey, leading with empathy, right? Modeling, hey, if you need to talk about anything, if someone says something to you that rattles you a little bit, I want to make sure that you feel comfortable coming to talk to me about that kind of thing. But I think that's like really, with the amount of information, the amount of things that could trigger or activate someone today, it's like trying to drink out of a fire hose. There's such an influx of things that can and really can't be controlled. And I think if your son is like opening up and talking about things, to be honest, I think they stand a good chance to like process and be vulnerable and work through some of the things. But if they are already in the process of like just talking about stuff, which I'll put myself in this young man's shoes for a little bit as a 16-year-old. When there was things happening, I wasn't quick to open up and talk about stuff like that, even though I was triggered and activated. And so if he's in the process and he's surrounding himself with other people and talking about those things, and seemingly what it sounds like is healthy other people, I think he stands a good chance to be able to bring something up when it is that he's activated. And what I tell parents all the time is, listen, you parents, mothers, fathers, you're very, very intuitive. Trust your gut. If something seems off, if he's coming from a friend hangout or a peer group or a church group and he's quiet, reserved, I tell parents all the time, you may not be on the bullseye, but the likelihood is that you're on the board somewhere, right? And so that comes with a conversation. So if you see it, you ask, hey, you okay? you need a couple minutes? You want to talk about what happened tonight? You want to talk about how the group was? You want to talk about how it was hanging out with your friends? Hey, when you get home from hanging out with your friends, I just want to lay eyes on you for a second, right? I just yeah, just let me see you. Yeah, come wake me up just so I know that you're here. And it's not just like I don't want to just hear the door close. I just want to lay eyes on you for a second, right? Again, lean into motherly or fatherly intuition. Again, it's a superpower. You've all got it. Yeah, again, you may not be on the bullseye, but you're on the board somewhere. The chances are that you're probably going to know if it is that your loved one's activated in some respect, and then it comes with the conversation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Can I add
absolutely.
something quick to that? I agree with what Sebastian is saying, but I think if you're if you're working, if you have a vulnerable teenager, which is I think what this parent is bringing up, who's wait, I'm sorry, the question's about
Essentially,
oh, it's
you
not
have
it's the son
a
that
sibling of.
sibling. I I always encourage that parents uh or as a mental health professional teach teenagers to have I don't know if there's a term for that. I was going to say exit line, but I'm not sure that's the right term. But a line that they can have prepared when they don't know what to say or when they are triggered. And the line should be, well, thank you for your concern. I'll talk to my parents about that. I'll talk to my brother about that. I'll talk to our counselor about that. I'll talk to our pastor about that. And that's a polite way to disengage without having to and then encourage, your son to circle back to the family, to the parents, to the counselor, to the pastor, whoever you trust, so that there are like safety defaults that the child can return to because you can't, one of the things we brought up, you can't control everything, right? But our kids have to grow up too. They have to learn. You have to let
Absolutely.
them live
Yeah.
exposed to situations that are what I call gray or
Yes.
uncomfortable.
No, that's excellent advice, Dr. Sheehan. I really appreciate you bringing that up because it is so important, right? I really like giving example language when I work with parents or clients, right? I'm like, oh, well, let's brainstorm what we can say in that situation, right? And do a little role play, but just having language ready to go. And I love that. So I want to pivot a little bit because we're going to actually invite our alumni in. I wanted to say one thing briefly because I know Daniel did put a question in the chat. And I want to just make sure that everybody understands, what warning signs are that might indicate that there's safety concerns or mental health issues, or that your teen's just struggling, and then when and how to involve professional support. And it'll dovetail, I think, a bit into, what Daniel was asking. And essentially, we as clinicians and behavioral healthcare professionals, we really look for significant changes in either behavior, mood, sleep, things of that nature. So, mood changes like rapid shifts in emotions, intense anger or rage, really high anxiety, persistent unresolved sadness, hopelessness, worthlessness, any talk about suicide, any self harm. Behavior changes like really, big social withdrawals or isolating from certain friends or even activities that they once really enjoyed, and not really wanting or being able to maintain or engage in self-care or what we call acts of daily living for age appropriate levels. So it's really important to get professional support. And we know we have a lot of research that supports early intervention leads to improved outcomes. It's so crucial. So if you are not already connected with a mental health professional or support in any capacity, please feel free to utilize us at Your Behavioral Health as a trusted resource. We are here to help. You can call any of our lines and we'll get you support. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody had a good grasp on that. And now I would love to invite our alumni in. So I'm going to introduce and ask Bella and Devin to please come on into the virtual chat here. You can turn on your cameras and unmute yourself. Hey, Devin. Hey,
Hello.
hi. All right. So if you all wouldn't mind, and Devin, I'd love for you to start. If you could just introduce yourself and kind of just share maybe, 1, 2 minutes of your experience and why you're here as an alumni.
Yeah, absolutely. My experience and introduction to this specific community was getting sober at 17. I am also an alumni of the New Life House Sober Living, graduated October 2024, been sober ever since. And I've been through just about every topic that has been discussed so far personally with my mom, who's also joined us tonight. And yeah.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Devin. Yes, and we'll be asking Devin and Bella's parents to join us very soon. Bella, would you mind just introducing yourself a bit and just sharing a little bit about what brought you here and why you're here today?
Um,
No pressure, Bella. What you went through Clear, right? Yeah. And how long did you go through Clear? Did you finish the program roughly?
I had went there for 3 months and then um I had graduated and then I went back for another 3 months.
And what would you say about your time at Clear? Would you say that it was helpful and why?
I would say it was helpful.
Yeah. Why do you think it was helpful for you?
I would say that it was helpful because it taught me like a lot of um new coping skills and it helped me communicate a lot more with my parents.
That's wonderful. And Bella, how old are you?
15.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Bella and Devin. I appreciate it. So, um, I would love to know, um, Devin, for you, you mentioned you kind of been through everything that we spoke about already. When it specifically came to you kind of navigating, probably advocating to your parents that wanting privacy, but they were really nervous about your safety. How did you guys deal with that before coming into treatment?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that my parents specifically gave me a lot of freedom to do as I pleased. I was actually just speaking with my mom about it earlier today that they took the approach of wanting to support me in any endeavors and, granting me the freedom to do as I pleased as long as I was being safe. And, all throughout my elementary grades, they knew the people I was hanging out with. They knew their parents. We were all friends and had sort of a sub community. And it wasn't until the knowledge of my substance abuse came about that they started to kind of crack down a little bit. And there were restrictions put in place. I know we talked about location tracking that was going on. Of course, Sebastian mentioned the airplane mode workarounds and various other things that I employed to, try and get away from their guys. And it was only after they knew that there were some nefarious things going on, so to speak, that they took a much more, a much stronger approach, I guess, towards keeping tabs on me. And I did everything in my power to step away from that and avoid any kind of insight on what was actually going on because I wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to rebel. I wanted to experiment. I wanted to try new things. And so keeping them away from, my whereabouts and my plans of, who I was hanging out with and what events I was going to became priority number one. Um, and they did their best, obviously, but I was gonna be who I was gonna be, and luckily I was able to find New Life House that changed that course. Um, thankfully. But yeah, so before that ever went into place, I think I did get a lot more freedom. And then right when things started to become apparent that I was headed down a bad path, they cracked down very heavily.
I really appreciate you sharing that, Devin. Bella, I'd love to ask you a question, and I'd love for you to share with us, what was the group experience like, coming into treatment at Clear and being in a group of peers, right? What was that like for you?
I would say it was different.
Yeah, how so?
Yeah.
Being able to talk to peers about your struggles and what you were going through.
I know for sure it was different because I never talked to anyone through until like Clear, and it was just, yeah.
Did you find it helpful being able to share when you've never been able to share before, and specifically to people that were your own age and probably going through a bit of similar things that you were going through?
I would say, yeah, it was helpful because I knew that I wasn't alone.
Yeah, exactly. I really appreciate you sharing that with us and being open about that. Um, I think it's really important. We actually have one of the parents asking, do we have teen support groups where they can share and feel relatable, right? And that is part of treatment through not only Clear, but they are also, groups in New Life as well, but New Life's more gender specific for young males. But in Bella's case, right, she stated she didn't really have peers to talk to until she came to Clear. And it is really incredible. Devin, can you speak a little bit about that experience having just a group of peers to open up and kind of go through that recovery process with and how it was helpful?
Absolutely. I don't think that I would have made it otherwise. I think that being in that environment where I was surrounded by people who all came from very similar backgrounds, and similar upbringings, doing the things that I refused to do because, abusing substances and being rebellious and all the other things that came with before finding treatment were more appealing to me. But as soon as I entered that environment and was surrounded by support and openness, especially, talking about things that you generally won't hear talked about at high school recess or lunchtime, opened my eyes in a way that allowed me to see this other path to follow rather than the one that I was already following. And now it's, something that I practice to this day, being open and honest and very vulnerable very regularly with, people that I'm close to of all likes to ensure that, I don't make any more mistakes and I'm living as honestly and principled as I can because I know now that it's much more appealing and much more beneficial life to lead.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You know what, Bella? I just thought of something. We had a question earlier come in from a mom, and specifically around makeup for her 14-year-old daughter. And she doesn't think that she needs to wear it. What would you say to that, mom? You're 15. What would you say about wearing makeup at 14, 15 years old?
Um, I don't know.
I told her that it was a pretty personal decision. Do you feel the same way?
I would say, yeah. I mean, I feel like everyone has different reasons on why. I know for me it was because um I just didn't like how I looked, so I would cover up my face with like makeup and stuff. I don't know in her case like what it would be, but I know for me it was like the way that I look, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What did you find it helpful being able to having your parents let you wear makeup? Did you find that helpful?
Mm, I would say yeah. they didn't really say anything about it, but I know like at some point it was like brought up a little bit, but then it went away. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Can I, Lindsay,
Right.
can I ask,
Yeah.
Sheldon, a difficult question? I mean, because this comes up. This is so, Bella. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist as well, and my concern when I've worked with teenage girls who wear a lot of makeup, and actually the ones that I get most concerned about who wear makeup very, very well, is that they generally look older than teenagers when they put on makeup well. And I've actually personally told teenage girls that I compliment you, well, you really know how to put on good makeup, but I also tell them I want you to be aware that when you put on makeup like that I'm seeing, I'm like, you're going to draw adult men to you, right? You're going to draw older men to you. And I want to know what your thoughts about that are. Sounds like you probably had some personal experience about that.
Um, I guess I never really experienced it for me, but like with my friends, then yeah, I do. Like I know. Um, mm,
Like, do you think that's a good thing, a bad
no,
thing?
no.
Good thing. Good,
I
bad.
mean, I would say like so and so because like that would be like a good hobby or whatever for like a teenage girl, like doing like their makeup and stuff. That's good. But then the bad part is like drawing attention to men that not good or that are not good. So that would be like another thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could understand why parents would be scared, right? To let
Yeah.
their teenage daughters wear makeup. That's a great point, Dr. Shi. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And Bella, I appreciate you asking or answering it so openly. I would love to take the time now to invite our alumni parents in. So we're going to invite Lalima, which is Devin's mom, into the chat. So I think she's on a separate screen. So Lalima, you can just unmute yourself and open up your camera and then we'll get you on. And then Bella, if you want to grab your parents and tell them to come in and join you, that'd be great. Thanks. Awesome. Lalima, thank you so much for being here. We'll start with you as Bella's parents, Scarlett and Jose come in. And I'd love for you to just share with the parents on the webinar tonight. What are some things that you took from, Devin going through treatment, uh, to really be things that you feel like truly changed your family and yourself?
Absolutely. And thank you for including me in this discussion. Can you hear me okay?
You can.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, listen, Devin's right when he says we gave him a lot of freedom. I think, I raised my kids the way I was raised, which is, I expect them to excel. I expect not to micromanage them. And I expect that, they're going to make good choices because I try to model the life that I would hope that they would like or want. What you can't control is, the nature part of your kid. You can control a lot of the nurture. And I think we experience this as parents, is we assume we're going to, grow these beautiful, perfect children that are going to be, model citizens and do everything perfectly. And, then they face the real world and their ideas start forming. And I think adolescence is an incredibly crazy time because I remember even being an adolescent and feeling very unsure of myself and insecure and who's going to be my friend and what do I look like and is someone noticing me and just feeling very on stage even if probably nobody really cared. So I think what we saw developing with Devin is a shift in his friends, a shift in his behavior. It didn't really line up with kind of what we thought would happen with Devin. And I remember very pointedly asking him one point because I was very frustrated and thinking, okay, he's not very academically inclined. And I said, do you know what you want to do? And I remember he looked me in the eye and he was like, I don't know. And it shocked me because up until that point, I was so assured, watching my son do all kinds of hobbies and creative things. He was musical, he was athletic, he did all these things that I thought, he really loved. And then all of a sudden he felt very like unhinged, like he just didn't have his bearings. And that was sort of the beginning of me starting to realize, he's kind of operating in a sense of feeling like he was lost, but I still wanted to pour in structure. And when Devin says, we were trying to rein him in or be more strict, I think more than anything we were trying to find a common ground to understand what he really wanted, more than anything, because it was less about sort of tracking him and more about, come on, grow up, like just tell us what's up. But he was very, very deliberately trying to just be completely nebulous about everything. And I think that's what made us want to clamp down more. Is like, why are you hiding from us? We're not people to hide from. We've never been very punitive with him. And it just felt very off, like there was a huge disconnect. So I think what came out of his experience and his growth was just to have a common ground to be able to talk. Because I think at the end of the day, we're not trying to change Devin as much as we're trying to meet him where he is and also set boundaries. I mean, the thing that's very clear is like, Devin knows, like, Devin's dad and I, we don't smoke, we don't drink, we've never done drugs. We're very square. And so it almost was like something he used against us, which was a little bit amusing at the time when he was kind of like, you don't understand any of this because you don't do any of this. And I was like, wow, like all of a sudden I'm doing everything wrong because I'm not in that world where it's like an accepted thing. And I'm a physician, so I take care of patients who smoke marijuana and who drink heavily and do lots of things. So I'm well aware of sort of the spectrum of like choices that people make. So it's less about the judgment and more about just understanding where Devin's head was. And I don't think Devin really knew where his head was, and he was just filling it with whatever he could fill it with. And my goal was just to kind of simplify and let him breathe. And that's kind of the journey that we went through. I think once we put him in a structured environment that wasn't our home, because we could not do it on our own. We tried so hard. It was for me one of my great mental failures to think that I couldn't perfectly structure an environment so my son could like decompress. It was a reality check. It was kind of bringing me down to earth, which was a good thing because I think we all need those moments in life where even if you do everything perfect, things go wrong. I mean, that's just life. And so we all learned from that experience. And now the rebuilding process has been great because we're not perfect, but we're at least able to talk. And that's really what comes out of this experience is dialogue is critical, I think, in all levels of life and society. And we're grateful that we can talk to Devin and he doesn't have to be something in our imagination. He can figure out who he wants to be, and we want to be a part of that journey. And now we can.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate hearing that. And specifically, myself, Dr. Sheehan Sebastian spoke a little earlier in the webinar about the importance around just opening up the space and opportunity to have those tough conversations. And I know it's something that is just part of our clinical philosophy and ethos here at Your Behavioral Health. We really push families to do that. And I'm just always so excited and proud when families really roll up their sleeves and get in there and do the hard work together. So I appreciate your share. I'd love to pivot over to Bella's parents. Welcome, Scarlett and Jose. Thank you so much for being here. And I'd love to open up and just ask you all, as you went through this process with Bella, right? How did you all specifically manage keeping her safe while respecting her privacy? Or are you still working that out? And if you are, please tell us about that too, right? This is real here.
Yeah, thank you. Well, keeping her safe, basically, we had to follow what the hospitals said, lock up everything, lock up pills, the medicine cabinet, knives, and so forth, anything sharp items. Um, it does give you a reality check where that happens. But after her being admitted to the emergency room and so forth, it's hard. You have to do what you have to do to keep her safe, and the good thing is we're a small family. It's just my husband and I and our two kids, Bella and Alejandro, and we all made sure to help each other out, help her out as well, and to keep everything away that she can. Now we joke about it, but I think that's more like an icebreaker, where it does, she did go through it, but at the same time, it helped her, or us keeping it as in a joking way, in a sense, it kind of helps us talk about it.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing so openly. And I agree, right? That's what we talk about. Every family is unique and different, and it's really so personal. And so when we give advice as clinicians or guardrails, guidance, support, right? Around safety, around privacy, right? We're always saying, hey, this is a framework, but we want to help you make it your own so that it works for your family. And it sounds like you all did just that, right? And with some families, it is about infusing a little humor, right? To really break up the uncomfortability so you can talk about the elephant in the room, which is really wonderful. Thank you so much. Halima, I'd love to come back to you and I'd love to ask you to share with all the parents that are on this webinar this evening. Most of them are probably, parents either that their kids pretty early on in treatment and or still struggling and maybe not in treatment and maybe just starting to show some signs where parents are getting nervous. What's one thing that you feel that you could share with them that you wish you would have known in hindsight?
I think this is something that we actually got from Sebastian. As much as a professional as I feel like having someone tell you that you have more power than you think you do was super helpful, because you're sort of navigating blindly, because most people don't have multiple iterations of children to go through and say, oh, that version I did this, so this version I'm going to do that. Even when you have two kids, they're so different, and you have to like learn that your experience with each kid is not going to be the same. Even if you think you've gotten everything right, something can go very wrong, and it's no fault of yours. It's just that's the way life works out. I would say that knowing that you have more power, and it's kind of the discussion I think you had earlier about who owns the phone, who owns, who provides for the child, that that setting the boundaries, like it's so important early on, because I grew up in a family where my father would be just empowering us constantly, and we took to it, my sister and I, we just said, okay, we will help manage our family, we will help run the family. My parents were immigrants, so the idea was very much like, oh, your kids, they're closer to the local culture, so they're going to be your guide. And I remember acting in that role. But of course, my kids are born in this country, and they're more assimilated, so I don't think they take that sentiment quite the same way. They're not looking as our guides the way I was a guide to my parents. And so I gave up a lot of authority and power because I was just living the life that I had been mentored through. And when I realized that, okay, they don't quite feel the same way, and now I have to take back that power and establish those boundaries, that was something that, I needed someone to sort of shake me and say, okay, you have authority here, you have power. We were just kind of going with, oh, handling it with kid gloves, and then it just continued to spiral out of control. and you don't quite know where to put your foot down and say, okay, the buck stops here. We're not going to take this any further. So I think just having some nerve to be able to take the initial sort of pushback as early as possible, I think is very important. I think just being able to say no, because the other thing the kids do is they split you. I mean, Devin would be one way with dad, another way with me. I would be the top one.
Devin's agreeing with you.
My husband would constantly be like, but what if, but maybe, but this. And I was like, bet nothing. This is ridiculous. No, we're not doing this. And so he and I would be wasting a lot of our energy just coming up with a unified plan. And that was a mistake. You got to get on the same page early, and you got to say, look, we have to protect the family. It's more than just the child, and we had a younger son. I mean, there's like so much more of a big picture, but that one area, when something's a problem, it just sucks all the energy out of the room. And you need to really try to make sure that the whole family doesn't go down in flames, because, and again, it comes down to just making those boundaries and establishing the power structure in the family, the hierarchy early.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so interesting to watch, Devin, you're nodding in agreement, right? Of like, we're being able to reflect on the behavior that was not great, and I really just appreciate that. So it's a really great thing.
Can I add something to that? Real quick. So Lily, thank you for sharing. Thank you also for sharing that you're a physician, right? If you heard me earlier, I tell people, hey, I go home and I'm a parent that loses my temper and argues with my kids, my wife. We're not perfect parents just because we're physicians. But something you said reminded me of a concept of parenting. And I mean, this might be an oversimplification, but there's permissive parenting, which all teenagers love, right? Oh yeah, do whatever you want, stand on something you want, right? Not a great idea, but it can sometimes work. Some kids are super responsible. I've met kids who are more responsible than their parents, right? They become responsible because they see their irresponsible parents. So every kid is different, right? Then there's authoritarian parenting, where the rules are too rigid, you're grounded for 6 months, you've lost your phone for a year. It's unreasonable. And then the more ideal space that I think you're speaking to, Leon, is what we call authoritative parenting, where you're setting rules and you're setting firm limits and boundaries. And that doesn't mean that they can't be negotiated, but you're, at least for now, this is the rule. Yes, we can talk about possibly changing it, but for now, this is the rule, and then you explain why. Because you've had problems, because this has happened, because that's happened. You're allowed to change rules as parents, but I always tell them, set a, like, it's open to negotiation, but for the time being, for the next month, for the next 3 months, we'll revisit it then. But right now, and kids say, why? Because we're the parents, right? It's, we're the adults in the house. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you also for sharing, Dr. Shi, and reiterating. So Jose and Scarlett, any quick last bits of words of wisdom that you'd like to depart on the parents before we wrap up here, or anything that you would like to let them know that you wish you would have known sooner? Oh, I think we might have some technical difficulties. We might have some frozenness. Scarlett and Jose, are you able to unmute? Oh, there we go. Awesome. So yeah, any last kind of words of wisdom you'd like to leave our parents who are watching this evening?
I would say that on my point of view in this path that we've taken from the first day that we saw Bella do or go through what she did, it kind of made us feel like not our daughter. But what we found out is that we were not alone and she was not alone. And that's what I would yell it out from a mountain, that parents, it starts from the parents being there for them, and then the professionals. And luckily we found professionals that were able to help Bella.
So appreciate that honest and very vulnerable answer. And I can't agree more. Me and Sebastian and Dr. Shi, we get to see these transformations happen every day, all day long, right? And the growth not only of the teen who's the client, but of the whole entire family. And so it's really a joy, and I can't thank you all enough. And Scarlett, I appreciate your vulnerability, and I know it's a scary thing navigating these teenage years and knowing what to do and how to do it. And we always appreciate your trust in us as like the quote unquote experts, right? Because it is scary to trust people to guide you and to support you, but know that we all, want what's best for your kids, and we're very appreciative when we get families that jump on board and jump in and work together. So thank you so much for being here. Our alumni, our alumni parents, thank you, thank you. We can't thank you enough. It's just really incredible for everyone to hear lived experiences. And so we're so grateful for you and your time and your experience and your trust in us. I'd also love to give a shout out to Dr. Shi, who has been answering all of the remaining pending questions in the chat. You are a rock star, Dr. Shi. Thank you so much for that. I'm sure all of our attendees with those questions really appreciate it too. Thank you for being here also, Dr. Shi, and just, speaking with us tonight and, giving us your knowledge and wisdom. And Sebastian, as always, we love your presence. Thank you for being you. Thank you for doing what you do, not only for New Life, but your behavioral health. And thank you to all of our attendees. And thank you to everyone that will watch this recording after. We so appreciate you, your trust in us as a valuable resource. And please, if someone your teen, a family member, or a friend are struggling, we are here to help. And you can feel free to reach out and contact through any of our main lines on our websites. And we promise we will get you in the right level of care, or your loved one in the right level of care and the support that is needed. So thank you to everyone so much for being here, and we hope to see you on future webinars. That's it. Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye bye.